You're locked into the Liberty Flames podcast, powered by Rogers Heating and Cooling, servicing Greater Lynchburg's HVAC and electrical needs. Schedule your service today at callrogers.com. Get ready for double coverage with Nick Pierce and Pat Kelly, the weekly podcast that takes you inside Flames football and around the nation before game day. Now, alongside former Flames All-Conference wide receiver Pat Kelly, here's your host, Nick Pierce.
Hey, what's up, Flames Nation? Welcome back into the show. I'm Nick Pierce. He's Pat Kelly. Glad you would stop by here on Double Coverage this week as we talk Flames football, much like we do every week. And we're walking you up to game day here this week. Tough one coming up for Liberty as they head out on the road to take on a very good-looking Old Dominion team this Saturday night. ESPN Plus. We'll have it for you on the radio as well. We're going to chop that game up for you. Also, look back to this past Saturday and the Battle of the Blue Ridge, Liberty and JMU from Lynchburg. So much to talk about here this week. We are thrilled, humbled, honored that you would stop by. Hit that follow button, subscribe to the Liberty Flames podcast, presented by Rogers Heating and Cooling, servicing Greater Lynchburg's HVAC and electrical needs. You can schedule your service at callrogers.com. But at that follow button, you'll get our shows downloaded directly to you, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us. Or if you're watching on the Liberty Flames YouTube page, we encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube page and get alerts every time a new show drops here on the Liberty Flames podcast. Also, you can find us on the Liberty Flames mobile app. Download it absolutely free from your mobile app store, your app store if you're Apple, Google Play if you're Android. Lots of ways you can find us. Pat, I used to hear there was a wrestler back in the days named Big Boss Man. He used to say, "I'm 6'5", 300 and whatever pounds, and I ain't hard to find." Well, the same thing applies to us. We ain't hard to find here at Double Coverage.
Not at all. No, and I'm glad we've gone to this video platform. It makes me feel like I've got to be a little bit more sharp, a little more crisp.
Yeah, a little more put together. I'm feeling the stubble though. My wife likes the beard, but the stubble look, that's a good one.
Listen, Nick, I am preparing for Movember. That'll be a mustache in November, which my wife is not a fan of. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I've never been a big mustache fan, except Hulk Hogan. That's two wrestling references in the first 5 minutes, by the way.
I took the under on that. I did not expect it.
You don't know me that well at all then. But in all seriousness, looking at the football side of things, which is why we're all here, tough start. I mean, no other way to put that. 1-3 right now. But I'll say this. There are 18 other programs in the country that are also 1-3. Two of them reside in Conference USA. That's UTEP and Middle Tennessee. A couple programs that I think a lot of folks thought would also be maybe a step ahead of where they are. Middle Tennessee with an experienced quarterback returning, year 2 under Scotty Walden at UTEP. I don't think anyone had them both starting 1-3. Certainly no one had the Flames starting 1-3. But it could be worse, Pat. There are 5 winless teams in college football right now, including 2 0-4 teams, one of which resides in Conference USA. That's Sam Houston. Oregon State 0-4, UCLA 0-3, UMass 0-3. And then you've got, 3 FBS teams that have already fired head coaches this year. Virginia Tech, Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy, the most recent victim, Deshaun Foster at UCLA. Things could be a lot worse right now, right?
It certainly could. Usually that kind of coaching silly season starts, mid to late October. So it is interesting that it's kind of accelerated. I know you and we've talked a little bit about with NIL and kind of the increased revenue. I think that it's going to start to accelerate some of these hirings and firings. Only time will tell, but I think the leash does get a little bit shorter for some of the coaches of these programs.
It's interesting. A lot of people were saying because it was going to more of a revenue pro model now that coaches might start to get more leash. I'm with you. I think it's the opposite way. I think that now you're going to start to see some of these coaches, and because it's so easy to turn a roster over now, right? I say easy. It's a lot more doable to turn a roster over now because of the transfer portal. And, that was always the big thing in the past is, we don't want to lose our recruiting class, and you need to give them a full 4-year recruiting cycle and 4 or 5 years. And I don't think that's the case anymore. You got 50, 60 new players just about everywhere every year, which counter to that, It's a lot tougher to build a culture, right? It's harder to build and develop. Um, but yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to get a lot tougher for some of these coaches. Mike Gundy, how about him? 21 years at Oklahoma State. That I don't know who the next person is that's 21 years in one place.
Nick, the thing that gets me is apparently, and I need to validate for truthfulness here, but apparently it was 18 years almost to the day. I think it was 18 years plus 1 day of his "I'm a man, I'm 40 years old" speech. So, I mean, how could they do it the day after? That was brutal. I will always remember that video. There is no doubt about
Yeah,
that.
no question. Everyone will. There are viral videos like that. You think about David Bennett and "We Need More Dogs," Mike Gundy, "I'm a man, I'm 40." The NFL, Dennis Green, they are who we thought they were. God rest his soul.
Playoffs.
But yeah, playoffs. Yeah, there's so many great ones through the years, and Gundy. Unfortunately for him, that's probably what he's going to be most remembered for. But he had a lot of good seasons at Oklahoma State. Anyway, this is not an OK State podcast, but we're rabbit trailing here. That's okay. We're going to get into the game here from this past week, and just remind you folks, there's a lot of season left. That was my whole intent here. There's some folks that are in worse shape, and there's a lot of season left, and you've got all but one of your conference games still to play here. And you got a couple of weeks in between before that happens. So the Flames have time to get this thing right, but I don't think that there's any question that the sense of urgency is starting to pick up here a little bit with, a couple weeks before heading out to UTEP. You got another in-state opponent coming up here this week. And, oh, by the way, you've got a quarterback injury issue with Ethan Vasco having to go out of the ball game this past Saturday against James Madison. And, Pat, I'll say, kind of pick it up there with that JMU game, just a few takeaways from it before we kind of move on. I thought the Flames were competitive early on. I thought that they were maybe not exactly where they wanted to be. They were getting outgained in the first half. But to Vasco's credit, he was finding creases in that defense. He was kind of taking what they were giving him, and it was working. And the Flames, there were some improvements this past week. Jay Billingsley knocking down a couple of field goals to get it to 3-3, and then the Flames took that 10-3 lead in the first half, 10-10 at halftime. This was a winnable game for Liberty.
It certainly was. And, I'd kick things off by saying major kudos to the students, to the fans, because the vibes on Saturday were immaculate. You and I kind of chatting on the sideline. I've been to a lot of Liberty games. I've played in a lot of Liberty games. That was the loudest I have ever heard it in that stadium. That includes BYU. That includes Virginia Tech. There was some big time momentum. There was a lot of energy in the stadium. But I think you're right. I think it's a game that Liberty certainly had a chance in. Speaking of vibes, as soon as Vasco scored that touchdown to go up 10-3, the place was going nuts. You and I looked at each other, kind of look at the clock, and I'm thinking, hey, if they can get a stop before the half, you get the ball back coming out of half, you could really be in a good position. Then JMU just puts together a great drive coming down the field. Barnett ends up hitting that corner route. I think it's a 21-yard touchdown catch. That was a little bit deflating because you pretty much threw your best punch in that first half. You did darn near everything you could to play a perfect half. So it's tied up going into the half, which honestly, if you would have asked me going into the game, it's tied up at the half. How are you feeling? I would have said great. I think the spread on this game was like 9.5 or 10 points. Liberty wasn't given much of a chance. So they did darn near everything they could in the first half. And I think into the third quarter, you just really started to see the team wear down a little bit. They'd been on the field for a really long time. JMU was having good success running the football. One of the things that really stood out to me, though, is Liberty's offense really was just behind the sticks or kind of off schedule the entire game. Averaged, I think, 3.5 yards on first down, which obviously makes the rest of your offense a little bit harder to execute. I think the defense held on as long as they could. The one discouraging thing for me for Liberty's defense Saturday was their red zone defense. JMU got into the red zone 6 times. They got points 5 of those times, and 4 of them were touchdowns. Your defense, which is it's been okay. I just wasn't able to kind of stand up when you really needed it. But, I think there were some encouraging things from the game. Unfortunately, you're sitting here 1-3, you don't get moral victories here. A loss is a loss, and it doesn't feel any good to say, well, we did these things well.
Right. Yeah. And, I think that's a good point. And one that Coach Chadwell made after the game last Saturday is, look, every time we took the lead, we let them go right back down and score again. And to your point, if you can get into halftime at 10-3 instead of 10-10, you get the ball coming out in the second half, albeit with a backup quarterback. because, Vasco gets hurt right before halftime. It's a shoulder injury or upper body, I guess is what it's being officially called. But it's something that he's been playing through actually since Jacksonville State. It just got exacerbated last Saturday. So don't know his status for Saturday. But to finish the thought, yeah, if you get into the second half 10-3, even if you kick a field goal there, maybe go up 13-3, you got a 10-point, two possession lead. Who knows maybe how that thing starts to play out, because then your defense can play a little bit differently, and maybe there's not as much pressure on a Michael Merdinger or an Ethan Houck who also played. So a lot of what ifs, I think, fair to say in there. The Flames did take a lead actually in the second. They went back up 13-10 on another
And
field goal, and then
Nick,
JMU comes back down and scores again.
that's a good call out. And I think I told you, I feel like one of the things that swung the game, obviously Vasco getting hurt is a big time one. But that first possession of the second half, you drive down to the 10-yard line. You are driving all the way down the field, and then you've got a holding call. Then you've got a tackle for loss. And now you're looking at whatever it was, 3rd and 15, 3rd and 18. I thought that was a squandered opportunity. I'm not breaking any ground here. It's not rocket science, but one of my keys for Liberty was when you get to the red zone, it's got to be touchdowns. So you get to the 10-yard line against a very good JMU defense. Then you shoot yourself in the foot. You're kind of moving in reverse. I thought that was a big momentum swing. You come away with 3 points there. Then JMU comes and gets the touchdown. At that point, you've got to really match kind of score for score or blow for blow, and Liberty just wasn't able to do it.
Well, be that as it may, and another thing, I think in the second half, the Flames weren't able to run the ball nearly as efficiently as they did in the first half, and some of that was Vasco and the non-designed quarterback runs, but they were averaging almost 5 yards a carry in the first half. That number dipped below 3 yards per carry in the second half, and so, and again, some of that goes to when you go beyond your starting quarterback, the other team doesn't have a whole lot of faith that you're going to throw the ball down the field. Some of those lanes to run in can start to close off a little bit, and some of the play calling, quite honestly, I think changed in the second half, because it had to. So this week, I'm very curious. Just with practice, I was out there the other day. I think it was Tuesday. Vasco was participating. He was dressed. That was encouraging because I think after the game on Saturday, everyone's thought was this is going to be a while. But the fact that he's dressed, he goes from an arm in the sling on the sideline Saturday to playing catch with Michael Merdinger on Tuesday. Again, limited, not a whole lot of stress, but Vasco's a guy that, you would hope an older guy doesn't necessarily need a lot of the practice reps, the physical reps. He just needs the mental ones. I'll be curious here as we get now later into the week how that looks. Merdinger is getting first team reps as well, but Coach Chadwell, and to his credit, I think he has an idea of which way he's going to go. I think we all kind of have an idea, but if it's not Vasco, you kind of play that a little close to your vest and say, well, you know what? We have Ethan Houck, we have Jaden Bradford. We're going to let all those guys compete for time here this week, and you only have so much time to do that, but hey man, if you can save that bullet and create a little doubt in Old Dominion's mind, all for it.
Well, think about what JMU did with their quarterbacks. You've got Barnett and you've got Sluka, who
we were talking all about this two quarterback system last week. We didn't see Matthew Sluka for a single snap last Saturday. I was stunned.
And it's probably not the time or the mood is not right with this coaching staff, but I'd be curious to ask the defensive staff, defensive coordinators to say, how much time did you dedicate to a game plan for Sluka being in the game? Again, not that it matters at all, but that's just an example of teams have to carve out that time. They've got to watch the extra film. They have to scheme for, well, what if it's a guy who's more mobile? Or what if it's their drop back guy? So your amount of practice time that you get is very limited on a given week. So if you're having to take valuable time to carve out for a guy that you don't know if he's going to play or not, there is certainly strategic advantage to kind of keeping that close to the vest.
What did you take away from Michael Merdinger's performance? I don't know if that's a fair question, but it's only his third collegiate game technically, and then you can say that if you're counting the one snap that he took at Bowling Green. So really, it's his second collegiate game with the bowl game at UNC last year. What did you take away?
I thought he did a good job of coming into a situation that you probably weren't expecting to get into the game against a top 10 defense in the country. And like we said, that first drive where we drove down to the 10-yard line, you couldn't have asked for a whole lot more. Yeah, you did the quarterback carousel and you got a couple carries by Hauk. But I thought he did a good job. I think with any quarterback, decisiveness is going to be a big thing. Um, this isn't his fault. I think the offensive line has struggled. It's tough as a quarterback to get the ball out on time, on tempo, when you've got pressure in your face almost immediately. If the O line is struggling with stunts or if they're just struggling with any type of a bull rush. But I thought he did as good of a job as he could have. We've kind of long belabored, or I have long belabored, wanting to see a little bit more passing from this team just because you've got weapons out on the perimeter. I did a little bit of a breakdown of a few plays this week on Twitter, just given some of the criticism that some tight ends and receivers have taken. But I think these receivers are very talented, and I'd like to see them get some opportunities. So to answer your question, I think Merdinger did a good job. I think he could continue to kind of climb if he's able to give his receivers a chance to make plays.
Yeah. 2 of 6 passing, 21 yards. Again, limited sample size a little bit. Ethan Hauk in the game, 1 of 5 passing. We saw Hauk carry the ball 4 times, as did Merdinger. Both those guys averaged over 3-4 yards a carry. It's just a question. I think with Vasco, this is just my opinion. I think it'll be a question of, one, what's his pain tolerance? And because if he's practicing, it's not something where they're concerned about he's going to injure it worse. What's his pain tolerance? And then more importantly than that, because I think it's probably pretty high, he's a tough kid. More important than that, how effective can you be at running the offense? Can you make the throws, the necessary throws to execute the game plan? And if the answer is yes to those questions, or yes to that question and pretty high, like I think for his pain tolerance, I think he's going to play Saturday. But if there's a question of maybe we can't do enough things in our game plan, we can't go into our bag of tricks enough for Willie Corn in the offense, then you're probably going to see somebody else. And I would think that's Merdinger, just going by the depth chart. But I would not surprise to see some combination of Merdinger and Ethan Hauk on Saturday night if it's not Ethan Vasco.
Nick, you didn't necessarily ask this, but I know I've been saying it for the last several weeks, but this team is different than that Fiesta Bowl team of 2023 that led the country in rushing. It's different than the team of 2024 that was 4th or 5th in the country in rushing. This could be an opportunity to kind of figure out how that identity of your team differs a little bit. You don't have Caden Salter anymore. You don't have Quentin Cooley. So maybe this is a team that needs to rely a little bit more on quick game. And maybe Merdinger is that guy who he steps in and he fires some bullets out there and he shows to be a very proficient passer. I will be curious to see kind of what the game plan looks like because I don't think any of the quarterbacks is as good of a runner as Vasco. So you are going to have to tailor your game plan to the guy that's going to be under center or behind center in the gun. So I'm curious to see, does this kind of prompt a little bit of an identity shift for the Flames offense?
And to give you an idea of where this team is, I mean, let's not forget Ryan Berger's medically retired. So you're not to your backup quarterback. You are to your third string quarterback, all things equal, coming into the season, because Berger would have been the backup. So this is a precarious space for this offense right now. Not making excuses, but look, I mean, it's going to be challenging. I think the Flames could be limited in what they do if Vasco plays because of, again, effectiveness with playing through this, or they're going to be limited in a guy that's in, playing his 4th or 3rd or 4th, whatever, collegiate football game. They're going to be limited in some ways there too. So I think you've got to be able, you mentioned the offensive line earlier, you've got to be able to rely on them. I thought they played a little bit better here this past weekend. I saw some encouraging stuff. And that could just be continuity. That's the second straight week that this unit, as it is, has played together. And you got a couple guys playing out of position as well. Talked to Aaron Fenimore a little bit this week, Flames center. He's kind of the anchor. And he hasn't played as well, I think he'd tell you, as he's capable of up to this point. But he mentioned just trying to play fast and not think. And I think some of that comes with playing together, side by side with the same guys. So now they've had a couple of weeks to do that. Maybe they're poised to have one of their better games coming up here this Saturday.
Yeah, I definitely think the continuity thing is a great point. You start to learn Exactly, all the tendencies of your brother beside you on the right and on the left, the more reps that you get. And that's why having an experienced team, or why you hear about, third and fourth year starters being such a big thing. Because you've taken thousands of snaps together. So I think you could be right. It will be interesting to see how they continue developing. I know we said huge improvements happen between week one and week two. You improve knock on wood, you improve all throughout the year. You're getting coaching again, you're getting time beside your guys. So I'm hopeful that we see kind of an exponential jump in terms of production and kind of how the guys are doing. I agree with you, Nick. I think they did a good job against JMU, but the best pass rush they're going to see all season. Those were physical guys. They were freakishly athletic, and for the most part I think they did a good job of holding up.
Well, they're going to see a pretty talented bunch again coming up here this week too. But before we really get into that game, continue to kind of hit on some of the positives here that Liberty had. They didn't turn the ball over this week after turning it over 6 times combined the previous 2 weeks, and we saw some made field goals. Jay Billingsley's 47-yarder in the first quarter that tied the game, 35-yarder in the third quarter that gave the Flames the lead. And remember, it was kind of open competition last week going into that game between he and Braden Beck. It was Braden Beck's job on last Tuesday. It was Jay Billingsley's job by Thursday going into the game. So it's been musical chairs, Chinese fire drill, whatever analogy you want to use at the kicker spot. But Billingsley, I think, did enough to maybe solidify himself. I'm certain he's going to run back out there for this week to kick it.
I think you're right. It was encouraging because they weren't just, kicks that just made it over the uprights. He banged those things through. So I think everyone in the stadium collectively was kind of letting out a breath of relief, I don't know, or of exultation. I think we were all very excited to see those kicks go in, just because sometimes all it takes is one or two plays to kind of get yourself in gear, and it's like, oh, I know how to do this. I can do this easy.
And
So
no one more excited than him either. Just watching his reaction on the sideline, and then his fellow kickers are coming over to congratulate him. I mean, it was just, special teams. That's a tight knit group. The long snapper, the punter, the kickers. They're all pulling for one another, and it's almost a team within the team, right? They're not saying they're not part of the team, but they have their own team within the rest of the culture. So that was good to see, and hopefully the Flames can rely on him going forward. But looking at this Old Dominion game coming up on Saturday, we talk so much about JMU being one of the more talented, or maybe the most talented outside of Oregon that Liberty had faced coming in. I'm looking at these numbers from Old Dominion, Pat, and look, first of all, behind the eight ball because they're coming off a bye week. So they've had an extra week to prepare. They've had an extra week to get over some nicks and bruises if they have any this early. They're 2-1. Ricky Ronnie's the head coach. He's in year 5 now, or actually year 6. It's his 5th one on the field because remember, they canceled their season in 2020 for COVID. But it looks like he's got his best team. And there was a lot of optimism around Old Dominion coming into this season. I was kind of the I'll believe it when I see it mindset because, you look back at what they've done over the last few years and it just hasn't really added up. Last year ended up going 5-7. The year before that it was 6-7, 3-9 in 2022. So, yeah, I was a little skeptical. And they just lost their quarterback, Grant Wilson. He transferred to Indiana. So I was a little skeptical of this team, but, man, they are putting up some numbers. You look at what they're doing total offense, 461 yards. That's 30th in the country. Rushing offense, 245 yards per game. That's 16th. And then probably the most impressive stat, Pat, is what we were talking about this week, their red zone. You mentioned Liberty's red zone offense, red zone defense. Old Dominion is the only team in the country that has scored a touchdown every time they have entered the red zone. They are 10 for 10, 10 touchdowns, no field goal tries. That is some incredible efficiency, and it all starts with their quarterback, Colton Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, they've been just unbelievably good. Kind of a not a cornerstone. I'm trying to think of the right word here, but a lot of times you'll hear you want to score points 100% of the time in the red zone, and typically 70 to 80% of the time you're hoping for touchdowns. So the fact that they're at 100%, I mean, they're clicking on all cylinders. They're a super balanced team. They're running the ball, 245 rushing yards per game, or in that ballpark. So
Yep.
top 20 there. Throwing the ball, 216 passing yards a game. not breaking any records there, not anything unbelievable, but just good complementary football. The other thing that I would kind of piggyback Nick on is, aside from red zone, just keeping their quarterback protected. In terms of tackles for loss, they've only had 8 TFLs allowed this year. That's second nationally. And then in terms of sacks allowed, they've given up 2, which is eighth nationally. So Liberty has struggled to get to the quarterback, and ODU has been putting up points and keeping their guys protected ahead of the chains, not allowing a whole lot of tackles for loss. So, I mean, that's a recipe for winning. And that's what Liberty was doing in their Fiesta Bowl season.
And it's a far cry from what it was at Old Dominion. You just go back 2 years ago, they gave up 61 sacks in 2023. They got their trigger man now, and they've got an experienced offensive line. It's 4 seniors and a redshirt junior up there, guys that have played a lot of football. You go back and you look at Colton Joseph, and you talk about how they've kept him clean. Well, when you look at the numbers, 73% completion percentage. He's 67% on the season, 68, 67. 73% completion percentage in a clean pocket. That number drops to 46% when he's under any kind of pressure. So you've got to be able to get in there, even if you don't sack him, just make him uncomfortable. But his legs are a weapon, man, and he is hard to get to. Dual threat, he's averaging 9.7 yards per carry. That's second best in the country for any rushers. 14th in the country in total offense at 307 yards per game. And he's 15th in points responsible for. Old Dominion's averaging almost 38 points a game. He's responsible for 18 of them a game. So, look, we always put a premium on the quarterback position, sometimes maybe too much so. We don't talk enough about an offensive line or another skill position guy. It is the quarterback here at Old Dominion that is making the difference. And only a second-year guy. He didn't even play that much last year.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. They found their guy. I enjoyed watching some of his Virginia Tech film, and then I saw just a little bit of Indiana, which he struggled passing the ball that game, but was able to run effectively. It's the second week in a row that Liberty's going to have to contend with a guy that can beat you with his arm and with his legs. So it really is going to be an interesting challenge for Liberty and for this defensive staff. But yeah, I mean, he's fun to watch, and I obviously won't be rooting against Liberty, but I always just love good football play. So watching a pretty good talent there is going to be pretty fun to watch, I think, on Saturday.
I take that back. He did play. He played in 9 games last year with 8 starts. It was 2 years ago, so he's a third-year guy. I knew he redshirted, but it was in 2023. He did play last year, but he didn't have nearly the numbers that he's compiling here this year. So they've got their guy out there in Norfolk. California kid coming all the way out to the East Coast, 6'2", 200 pounds. He's going to be tough to deal with. For Vasco, you hope on a personal level as well he's able to play in this game. This kid was originally committed to Old Dominion. He's from Chesapeake, so a 7.57 talent. Decommitted very late in the process, ended up at Kansas. He got that Big 12 offer late in the deal there. Goes out to Kansas for a year, then ends up at Coastal Carolina trying to get closer to home, and now here at Liberty. So you kind of hope to see, Vasco be able to go out there and play against the head coach that actually recruited him originally. And then obviously for Liberty's standpoint, you want to have your starting quarterback. And then looking at the defense they're going to face, we talk all about this Old Dominion offense. Some things that kind of jump off the page at me are just the number of TFLs that this team has racked up. And they're doing it, by the way, without their All-American linebacker, Jason Henderson. He had to medically retire, just had too many, I think it was knee injuries with him. But that guy was a tackling machine. So the Flames, while you're sad that his career ended that way, you're also thankful that you don't have to deal with him here this week. But they've got 20-plus TFLs, 24 TFLs in 3 games. Monarchs are 2-1, 7 sacks. And they're +1, +2 in the turnover margin as well. So they're doing a lot of good things defensively, even in his absence. And you look at what they did in Blacksburg the last time they played. They built a 28-0 lead. I mean, they were not letting the Hokies get anything on the board.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team that's not intimidated by anyone that they play. I feel like it's cliche, but, they've taken on the personality of their head coach. These guys are coming out to win every single game. We talked about the Indiana game. They lost by 13. They were in it until the fourth quarter. If your quarterback doesn't give the ball away 3 times, that results in 10 points. You may be looking at a game-winning drive. So it certainly is a talented team. I think they're resilient. scrappy feels like another cliche word to use. Just having watched them though the last several years, they're a team of a bunch of fighters.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this is their best year. If you look at history, though, Liberty has pretty much dominated this all-time series, Pat. The last four times that these two teams have met, it's been Liberty victories, and the average margin of victory has been 28 points. The last time they got together was 2023 here in Lynchburg. Liberty won that game 38-10. The last time they met in Norfolk was 2022. Liberty won that game 38-24. And that was a game that was in doubt at halftime. Remember, the Flames made a quarterback change, went to Jonathan Bennett, and kind of took control of the game in the second half. A 45-17 in Lynchburg back in 2018, the Flames' first game at the FBS level. That was a 52-10 blowout. Old Dominion's only win in the series came all the way back in 2013, the very first time these two teams got together. Old Dominion rallied to beat a then FCS Liberty team 21-17, and they did it with an eventual NFL quarterback, Taylor Heineke, at the helm for the Monarchs. So there's your history lesson.
What do they call it? Was he the Green Lizard, or what was his nickname?
That I can't. You got me stumped there. Did they have a nickname for him?
He did have a nickname, and this was I think when he was with Washington. But I'll have to go back and look it up, and we can post this after the podcast goes. But it was the something Lizard, I'm pretty sure.
So another in-state opportunity here for the Flames, another Sun Belt opponent. But really for Liberty, it's about bowl eligibility, right? You want to stop the skid. You want to be able to be rewarded for the progress you've made, because I think, like we talked about earlier, there was some progress made by the Flames in that game last week against JMU. It just didn't show up in the final score. If you get a win here, you get it to 2-3, and then you've got a bye week. And maybe Vasco gets that much more healthier. Maybe some other guys. I mean, the Flames it's not just Ethan Vasco. They're without Marcus Clark on the defensive line. They're without Trey Badowski at left tackle. That's a big one because DJ Geth is having to play out of position right now. Typically your left guard. Maybe you get a Vaughn Blue back. His is kind of a nagging foot injury that you really just need to rest it. And playing at 70 or 80% right now probably isn't the best idea. You rest it, and hopefully you get him back in his prime, sometime into conference play, maybe for November. I'm just speculating. There's been no official timeline given on Vaughn Blue, but I think there's a few of those like that you want to be able to rest those guys and get them back strong when you're getting into conference play, or maybe a game or two into conference, because that's so important right now. All of your objectives are still in front of you despite this start. You can still get to a bowl game. You can still play for a conference championship, but you got to start to kind of figure some things out.
Yeah, you just got to get off the schneid. Like in baseball, you go on a slump. All it takes is just get that first hit, and then you could possibly start to get things going. I think the same thing for Liberty. Put some positive things on film on the field. Guys will start to kind of feel a little bit rejuvenated. At least that's how it was for us in my senior season 2012. I think we started 1-4. I know you and I were talking about this. Finished the season 6-5. Not that that's an incredible record, but you start out poorly, you rattle off a win, then you get the next one. So I think the same could happen for this team as well.
Yeah, it's very possible, and that's a great point. And that was the last time Liberty started a season 1-4, was that 2012 season. They finished up 6-5. Flames have not had a losing season since 2005. So I understand Flames fans are a little anxious right now, a little upset. We're not used to this, but there's a lot of season left, and I think that this coaching staff and these players are going to circle the wagons here and some point start to get it right. Even if it's not this weekend, you've still got conference play after that. So 6 o'clock Eastern kickoff on Saturday night at Ballard Stadium in Norfolk, Virginia. We will have it for you on the radio, 88.3 FM, Lynchburg, Roanoke, Danville, statewide on the Journey, the Liberty Flames Sports Network from Van Wagner, and then also on the Liberty Flames mobile app. And, of course, you can also find us on our social media platforms as well, the official Liberty football account and the Liberty Flames Sports Network account also. So obviously we're watching that game Saturday night, Pat. I'll be there on the sideline, but what are some other, maybe another game or two that you're going to have your eyes on here this weekend around the country?
My cop out's always the Fighting Tigers of LSU. They play.
They
Ole
got a
Miss.
big one.
in Oxford. So that'll be my game that I've got on at 3:30. And then I think the late games, I think Bama plays Georgia. I think that's going to be an awesome matchup. And then I know Penn State and Oregon play. I mean, there's a full slate of games. But let me go off the trail here, or whatever the saying is. Not a football thing to watch, but the Ryder Cup. I'm a big golf fan. Always love when the Ryder Cup comes around. So I will also be watching that.
Well, go back to that LSU Ole Miss game. Trinidad Chambliss is going to start again at quarterback for Ole Miss. Austin Simmons, their starter, has been hurt, so it looks like a third straight game for him. Those are all good ones. That Georgia-Bama game, after the lunacy that thing was last year in Tuscaloosa, Georgia's so strong at home. I'm curious to see how that one plays out in a bit of a rivalry. But also in-state here, how about Virginia and number 8 Florida State? That one's kind of got my eye as well because the Seminoles are 7-point favorites, but only 7-point favorites. Virginia not ranked at 3-1, but Chandler Morris, their quarterback, has played lights out, and they are putting up a ton of points right now. I think that could be one to keep an eye on there, and the Seminoles better not sleepwalk into Charlottesville.
Now, and historically, I think they've had some trouble when they make it up to Charlottesville. I think they've dropped a couple big games there in the past. So I'm glad you called that one out. That'll be a good one to watch, and I will actively be rooting for a home state team in that one.
Yeah, I'm also keeping an eye on number 16 Georgia Tech and Wake Forest. I won't be able to watch that UVA game because that's at 7, so that'll be right in the middle of ours. But Georgia Tech and Wake Forest, they play at noon. Curious to see if the Yellow Jackets can keep this thing going, man. They're 4-0 right now. Brent Key is doing an incredible job down there. And that was like one of the most boring hires ever, right, when they hired him. And he is just doing big-time stuff down there in Atlanta. So that'll be another one I've got my eyes on this week as well. Well, we're running out of time here on the pod this week. Thanks so much for stopping by. As always, you're locked into Double Coverage. We are part of the Liberty Flames podcast, powered by Rogers Heating and Cooling, servicing Greater Lynchburg's HVAC and electrical needs. Schedule your service at callrogers.com. Pat, thanks so much for hopping on board, as always.
Always good to talk football. Looking forward to another good college football weekend.
All right, go be a dad, and then we'll chat again here next week, all right?
All righty.
This has been Double Coverage. I'm Nick Pierce. He's Pat Kelly. We'll talk to you on Saturday in Norfolk.
You've been listening to Double Coverage with Nick Pierce and Pat Kelly. Hit the subscribe button and listen each week to this and all podcasts on the Liberty Flames podcast channel from Van Wagner on the Liberty Flames Sports Network.